100%
quiet.
the whole time.
Alright, let's go.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have a long agenda. But we're gonna try to be as succinct as we can. We're gonna follow, or we're gonna discuss everything around, again, our board superintendent priorities. And everything that we do as we move forward is around our SGS and planning in units 23-24. We're gonna continue with our board monthly cadence. Today we are at the board performance planning meeting. We have at least a couple of meetings before we adopt the budget on June the 6th. So today we're gonna lay out, Ms. Bentley and the team are gonna lay out a lot of information of what's gonna happen, what you're gonna see at the board workshop, a lot of information at the board workshop. And then again, the board updates, et cetera, until we get to budget adoption on June the 6th. Today we're gonna follow board operating norms. We're gonna have a few spots during presentation so we can stop and discuss at least 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the time constraints, so that we get to answer all of your questions. At the end, if there's something we didn't answer, we will stick around if you have a few more minutes that you can basically your time and answer any additional questions that we didn't get to during the presentation. So today we have a combined presentation. As you know, the budget encompasses everything that's happening in the district. We're gonna have the leadership team, particularly Dr. Basurto and Ms. Basaldua, talk about some of their planning, and we're gonna have, and really around return on investment on a lot of the projects that they're doing. And we're gonna have business operations presenting around budget, staffing, status updates on some major projects and technology budgets. This is the order today. We moved up finance. We normally have finance going at the end, but there's so many things that are happening with finance right now that are very relevant. We wanna make sure that we can answer those questions first and then move into the rest of the agenda. So with that, I'm gonna hand it this, I'm not gonna read this to you, but these are all the topics that we're gonna cover today. So it really is a lofty agenda, but we're gonna try to make the best of the time. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Ms. Benjamin.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. All right, so this is kind of gonna be a combination of several months' work. We still have a little bit to do, as we'll talk about, but it's been a lot of people having a lot of input. So we're gonna talk about the board responsibility. It's the board's responsibility to adopt a budget at the fund function level. I think we've talked about this a couple of different times. And we have to have a budget set by June 30th, which this year we all know we're gonna have the public hearing and adopt the budget on June 6th. So we're a little earlier than we have been in past years, but looking forward to having it set early, and then we can move on into working on closing out the fiscal year that ends June. Again, y'all seen this slide before. Fund function, so that's the first group of letters is the fund, second group is the function. That's the level at which the board will adopt the budget. And also the board's responsible for adopting the general fund, child nutrition, debt service, or sometimes we refer to it as interest and sinking. So you'll see those budgets here a little further down. So general fund, what is it? General fund includes your instructional services, administration, transportation, PPS, and technology. And where do those funds come from? They come from property taxes, our state formula, gate receipts, indirect cost. So property values. So you can tell the green section is the property values, and you'll notice the asterisk there for 2023. As we've talked before, these are the estimated values. The Bexar County Appraisal District is still going through their appeals process, and we should have a certified value by July 27th. So you can see right now we are estimating a 14% increase over 2022. So and that is in millions. So our property estimated value is $2.6 billion. So this slide, it kind of talks about the history of the tax rate. And this slide combines the INS tax rate along with the M&O. So the big one on the bottom is the M&O, the smaller one at the top INS, which serves our debt. And you can see that we're anticipating adopting just over $1.08 for 23-24, which is less, and that comes back to tax compression that the state has been doing on their end. And we'll talk a little bit about the INS as well. I really think this rate is gonna be down a little bit because of the INS.
Correct.
And we'll talk about that. All right, so the history of the M&O, I wanted y'all just to see what the maintenance and operation tax rate is. None of this money will go to serve debt. This is strictly to operate the district for your general fund, which we talked about is PPS, administration, etc. So with tax compression, we're anticipating adopting a little over 87 cents per $100 valuation for this school year. And one thing you'll notice when we send out we have to put a notice in the newspaper of our public hearing that we'll have on June 6th. You'll notice that we'll have this rate. We're also gonna have a higher rate probably than what we're gonna adopt for INS. I can always go below what we publish without having to publish again and have another public hearing. If my tax rate goes up, then I have to publish another notice and have another hearing before the board can adopt that tax rate in probably late August or early September. So that saves us money not having to post. It's expensive to post that quarter page ad and anyway, time consuming. So anyway, we're looking at probably a little over 87 cents per $100 valuation. And if you will look in 16-17, it was at $1.17. So it's a pretty good decrease. All right, so our general fund revenue, so that 87 cents along with what we're gonna generate from the state is gonna give us the local revenue. It's gonna be about 23.6 million. Not all of that is from property tax. That also has our interest earnings. We've talked about that. I think we're probably gonna earn about 1.8 million in interest earnings since the interest rate has been going up. The state revenue, that is from the state, about 58.3 million. Federal revenues, that's our indirect costs, that's our SHARs, that's our Medicaid, MAC earnings. So we're anticipating a total revenue of about 86.8. That's a little bit more than my estimate that we had of about 85 million. And it was based on an ADA of 6,480. And something else to note is this is on current law. This is what is in effect today. It is not what the legislature is working on or anything like that. So this could change depending on what happens in the legislature.
Which, thank you for pointing that out. Board members, that is something that is up in the legislative session. You've probably heard Governor Abbott, that's a huge proposal that he and the Lieutenant Governor are moving through legislative session. It has already made it out of committee, so it is on the floor. The Senate has already approved their recommendation. It's stuck in the House right now, but we do expect that they will, they're bringing a huge reduction, so that's gonna have a huge effect on us in terms of how we're funding just our everyday operations in the district. And that's a separate conversation from even the voucher systems that you're hearing about. There was a Senate committee that was called last minute yesterday morning at 8 a.m. People were advised the previous night that they would be moving that up overnight. And so it did get stuck. It's still stuck there. I think they expected they would vote it out. But there's a lot of talk among the rural communities, which is typically very conservative, but because of the thought of decimating their public school system, it is still held up. And we believe we're headed to special session. And so keep that in mind, because we will adopt this budget on the, with your support on the 7th of June. But the belief is that special session will go all the way through September. That's huge implications for us, because we still need to talk about raises and things like that. And so, trying to get as much information as possible, but thank you for using that as an example, because the revenue is 86. So think about that slide I always use to talk about how we have a $96 million budget. It's probably gonna be a little more because of inflation. Everything's costing us more. So we've gotta find the ESSER funding, the cliff is this year, starts this year. September, ESSER two goes out, is ESSER two this year?
Yes.
And then ESSER three will be September 24. And that's, about
Another 19 million or so. of
19 million.
Salaries.
So there's a 10 million deficit right now, and then we're gonna need to think about how we're gonna come up with the other 19. So that's a challenge that every school district's facing right now, so back to you, Ms. Bentley.
Also, point out, you can see the difference from one year to the other between the local values, the local revenues and state revenues. You can see state revenues went down about 3.6 million. The increase in local revenues is the property tax, so it's kind of shifting. But that doesn't mean we're gonna get more money. With House Bill 3, they pretty much have it where you're gonna get a certain amount of money. So if it comes from property tax, then they're gonna make up the difference. So that's why you're gonna see the shift, but you're not gonna see an increased amount of money overall. House Bill 3. Alright, so this is kind of a busy slide, but this is actually how you will approve the budget, adopt the budget, is at the function level. So on the left are all the different functions. We've got a description of what that function serves, what we are proposing 23-24, and this is still a little bit of a work in process. I don't think the overall total's gonna change much, but we're still tweaking some salary stuff. Still working with the operating partners on their budgets, because I don't know if you're aware, but we have changed how we're working with the operating partners on their budget. They have kind of full responsibility for their budget now. So we're working through that process, and it's quite a learning process for the operating partners, because they've never really had to manage their full budget. So, we're still working through that. So there could be some minor tweaks, but I do not anticipate anything, major changing out of this budget. So you can see that in, our amended budget for 2023, we're at 96 million, which 10 million of that is facilities acquisitions and construction. So if we took that out, we would be at 86 million. So we're about 2.5 million higher than we were last year when you take out the facilities acquisition. So you can see so far this year, I've not built anything into there. So we need to talk, once salaries and where the board decides we want to end up, we can decide on what to put in there. You can see instruction is down. A lot of that is we've really been looking at the vacant positions to whether they really need to be filled. I mean, like in my department, I've got some open positions. I'm not filling them with, frontline. Things have streamlined, and the team has been very, very efficient. So, every time I have a resignation, I look, do I really need it? And I think that's what every department is doing. I mean, we have to. So we're still looking at staffing vacant positions, whether to freeze them, whether to completely take them off the books, or whether they need to be filled. So we're still some evaluation.
Ms. Bingley, just as an example, board members, we have bus driver positions. We've carried, what, 9? About 9 every year. We can't fill them. The reality is we cannot fill them, and so some of those we're gonna take off the books, because, again, we can't fill them. The other thing we have working, as a challenge for us, the districts around us have just, a lot of them are raising their minimum hour. Remember last year we talked about raising the minimum hourly wage to, I think it was 13. Well, everybody around us is just took it to $16. And so $3 is a lot of money, when you talk about hourly wages and things like that. So that is probably going to be a proposal we're going to bring to you guys in terms of the hourly wages, because, if we don't become competitive, then we'll lose people. And we just had a job fair yesterday, and they were, able to sign up 12 new individuals, various departments, nutrition, what were the other ones, Ms. Levine?
Custodial, nutrition, custodial, and one bus driver.
And then 2 special ed teachers, right?
And 2 special ed teachers, correct.
And so, those are other factors that we're gonna need to take into consideration in terms of increasing the hourly wage so that we're competitive and we don't lose people, so.
All right. Just, as we make updates, we'll put it in Alright, so child nutrition. Child nutrition is our food service and it includes all costs associated with operating the cafeterias and catering. The money comes from the National School Breakfast Lunch Program, a la carte sales, and catering. Ms. Ruiz has provided a balanced budget this year, so her revenues, equal her appropriations. And you can see the 22-23. Remember, we did about a $1.2 million, budget amendment early on, where she bought furniture, and I'm not sure what other things, some vans.
Redesign of the Kennedy
Yeah.
cafeteria.
And that was out of their fund balance that they were required to spend because we had too much according to, USDA. And probably we'll see that again, I think we probably still have a little bit of an excess, which I think their excess is you can only have about 3 months operating.
Ms. Bentley, this is also the fund that we use to pay for what we're adding to the warehouse. We pulled some of the funds there for the upcoming refrigerators and things, right?
I believe we did. Yes, sir.
Just to connect it for you guys, for board members.
Yes. And anything that you do over $5,000 with, child nutrition funds, you have to submit a form to Texas Department of Ag and they have to approve it. So if they wanted to buy an $8,000 other, we have to submit it to Texas Department of Ag and they have to say, yes, you can do that. So, it's got some strings, but, really I think a lot of the revenue is generated from the supper program. I think that's where the funds are being generated, not really making it just on breakfast and lunch, but the supper program, it has a little bit less restrictions. And that is, really honestly a moneymaker for the child nutrition.
And most of our kids are free. For us, we're 100% free board members. In case anybody ever asks you, every single one of our kids qualifies for the program. We are one of those districts that gets it.
Provision for.
Right.
Alright. Debt service, I need to work on this slide a little bit, I need to put in the taxes and stuff. This is based on about a 21.5 cent tax rate, and I believe we're gonna be down about 19.5 is where I'm thinking. Cause in the debt service, you're really only allowed to tax what you need to make your debt payments. So our payments are 4.7. And if you'll look at the payments from 23-24, we had 5.4. And now this year, 4.7. Remember a couple of years ago when we refunded those bonds? Now you're seeing that first year, we really didn't see the result of that. But now we're starting to see about $600,000 a year in reduction in our bond payments because of the refunding the board approved a couple of years ago. I think we refunded 2 different sets of bonds.
We did.
Into feast, some, and the also where we just went on and paid them off. So anyway, that also is one reason we get to reduce the tax rate. The values are going up, but also our requirements that we need are going down. Alright, so here's the history of the INS tax rate, and again, right now, I'm saying 21.5 is what we'll have on the notice, but I really think we're gonna come back in at probably about 19.5 cents per $100 valuation. Alright, we're continuing to look at our return on investment, especially on our considerations, and we've seen these buckets, they're in pretty much the same buckets that we've had the last couple of years, especially since COVID. And we're continuing our work with ERS on the return on investment. Again, just a reminder, still a legislative session. All these numbers are based on current law and on a 2.6 billion estimated values of the property taxes. You'll also start seeing in board update as we're working on the final budget amendment for 22-23. And, I can tell you I'll probably be a little high on some of the stuff we move because we're having the final budget amendment so early in June. And I can't be overspent by a function. If I do, that's an audit finding. And so I usually err on the side of caution and probably have a little bit larger balance in there just to make sure we don't get caught on that, especially, we're at least 2 weeks ahead early, and I don't like surprises, and I certainly don't like audit findings. we have an opportunity that we could move it to ESER three, but by having the HVAC in there, with it being a capital item, which means it has a per unit cost over 5,000, is we do not get to charge indirect cost on that money. And our indirect cost rate is about 12%. So when you take 12% times about $6 million, you know, that's about $700,000 that we can put into the general fund through indirect cost. So you'll probably see us coming back and moving the 6 million to local and moving some, hopefully trying to move some stuff out of local. If not, we'll hit fund balance, but we're gonna then move other stuff into ESSER to make up that 6 million, possibly in this upcoming year. But anyway, we don't wanna leave $700,000 when it's still district funds, it's just different buckets. But we have an opportunity to increase by 720,000. Yes,
Or,
sir.
I wanna do a little bit of relevance, on this, so think about that, she said 700,000. I want you to think back to the slide we presented, at our last board performance planning meeting. 1% raise for all employees is $1 million for us. So 700,000 goes a long way, because obviously, we're gonna look at something greater than 1%, but just to put perspective. If we bring a recommendation to you, what I'm seeing around the area is 3%. 3% is gonna be $3 million, just right there. And so these moves that were done, so again, you hear us talk a lot about rate of investment in these moves. Ms. Bentley just talked about the refinancing of our bonds, was it 2 years ago? About 2 years ago?
Yeah, I think so.
And now it's starting to show savings for us for the long term, that quite frankly, we're gonna need to use that money right now. So I say that because both ladies, Mr. Trevino, the group, in terms of looking at all our finances and finding the opportunities for us to bucket some of this money, because we're gonna need it for raises. Our employees need the adjustment, they're dealing with inflation just like the district is. And so, just to give you a little perspective on these moves. And I think we're about to stop to give you some processing time, but back to you, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Could you go more into what indirect cost revenue is?
We go through a process in January where we list out like all the administrative costs. And you have a restricted rate and an unrestricted rate. So like on Title I, restricted rate, if you don't charge any administrative functions into the federal grant, then you can take the unrestricted rate, which is, all our salaries in here. And, board expenses, trying to think what else.
It's like overhead that we
Yeah.
can charge to the grant.
Correct.
That's the indirect cost, that's the best thing I can think of, it's
Yeah,
the overhead
overhead.
that we can't charge directly to the grant, we get to take 12% to cover what Ms. Bentley just said.
So it's easier to do that than try and go through for example, ESER two, the way it is right now, cause it's more restricted
Yes.
to do that?
If I leave it in ESER, then I have to meet the federal purchasing guidelines, I have to use it for what ESER was intended. If I bring it into the general fund, I can use it as any other general fund revenue.
Alright,
So
thank you.
we try to maximize that on all our grants.
We'll probably list that in the board update, so you guys get to see it.
Any other questions?
A few minutes for questions that are processing. So one of the questions, and I'm gonna call it Mr. Espinosa, but one of the questions was, why is ADA so low? You go back to one of the slides, our ADA that Ms. Bentley has listed there is about 6,400. Do you wanna answer that question, Ms. Bentley?
It basically is our enrollment is declining and our kids aren't coming to school.
So, and for the state, from the state perspective, we only, and this is a continuous, I probably preached that for every year I've been here. But that's, unfortunately, we still have to hire the teachers as if the students were here. We prepare for every single student being in class. But the state funds us on the ones that come to school. And it's a really, backwards approach, but that's how we get funded, unfortunately, from the state, and that hasn't changed. So even we might have 100 kids, but if only 85 show up, the state gives us money for 85, even though those 15 that aren't coming require more interventions and more, funding, frankly, so that we can mitigate their learning loss. The state funds us at 85%. So that's really impactful in how we, operate. So when when the students aren't here, it hits us academically and it hits us financially,
Right.
so.
And that is a discussion in legislative session, that we move funding to enrollment base versus ADA. I will tell you, it's been stuck in committee, it has not moved out of committee discussion, so there's not a lot of, push to assist the school districts. It was included in the board's, your legislative priorities that we sent up, as is every school district across the state is doing that. And we are receiving projections on enrollment. I will tell you, for us, I didn't recommend that we go full enrollment. I think we need some combination. Going on just full enrollment does not help us either. We need a combination of both. And so, it's that 15% that's really killing us right now, and 85% is where we're at. Our kids just, they're not coming. And so we've tried to incentivize the schools. I know a few years back, we were telling the principals, we'll look at your numbers at mid-year, and we'll settle up a little more back money to your budget. And so, some schools do better with it than others, but overall as a district, 85% is where we're standing, which puts us right there with everybody else. Cause I know, my colleague, EISD, they're at 83% in attendance.
Well, and every student, when they walk in the door, the basic allotment is $6,160
Right.
for a general ed child, not a state compensatory ed student, not a special education, not a GT, just a basic child. When they come in, we get $6,160. So if they're here 85% of the time, we only get 85% of the $6,160. And like Ms. Martinez said, you still have to plan for the entire student to come. You need a chair for him, you need a teacher, cafeteria needs to be planning to feed that child, so.
Are you factoring in also this voucher system to these numbers, or you're not even?
Not right now, because I'm going on what is current law today.
Right, okay.
And also, if you'll notice, Function 11 had a pretty good size decrease, about 1.3 million, but that's, salaries and stuff that we have moved to ESSER. I mean, we're not cutting instruction.
Another question is, the slides for the, I guess, budget and amended budget, do you have a slide that has those in percentages? Like a percentage of total budget, for example?
No, but I will. I have
Okay.
a neat little, slide that I'm preparing for May 30th, that I think is gonna be,
What do you wanna see, sir?
I asked because the EIT side,
Do you wanna go up?
can you go back to that slide?
I can. This
Right
one?
there.
Yeah, the data processing services,
Yes.
is that IT? Is that what I can call IT? Or-
Technology.
Technology.
And a combination of both,
Okay.
It's got fire alarms in there,
PEEMS,
beams, technology,
infrastructure, and you know what? Actually, Mr. Greathouse is gonna answer that question for you here very shortly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to.
Well, and the increases, so go back to that slide, Ms. Beverly, please, I'm sorry. Some of these, I wanna point out, because I'm looking at that, if I'm you, I'm thinking like, why would we decrease instruction and a lot of other things go up? What we've been saying continuously is, we've got, especially on the operations side, everything with inflation is going up, that includes our salaries, et cetera. What we can't do is move electricity to a grant, but what we can do is supplement our instruction, all those functions that start with a one, our instruction, the resources and media, curriculum, even probably down to instructional leadership and school leadership. All of those expenses are what impact our students more directly. Everything impacts our students, but those are more direct, and those are the ones that we have an opportunity to move into what we call soft funds, the grants. We've said several times that we've applied for every grant opportunity that we can. Those are usually and the most likely expenses that qualify, but I can't move electricity and or our water costs into some of those grants. So what we do is leverage those items that qualify and move them into grants. So that's what you see in going back and forth. So that decrease isn't really a decrease. You're gonna see once we get into May, that those are the things that live in ESSER. The function 11 in ESSER is almost 100%. It is going to function 11, the monies that we have there. So that's where we leverage. I don't wanna go past this and not voice that in as far as Mr. Espinosa, function 53, that is infrastructure, the technology, and that doesn't even include the, hardware that we buy. Right, again, we try to tap into grants, and Mr. Viejas is gonna give you more details about that here shortly.
Let me also point something else out, board, you might see also an increase in terms of, safety and security. That's a huge topic right now, there is a House bill that is going to go in effect, that will require all school districts to have silent alarms. Now, we've sort of taken care of that, but now they've taken it to, you must have a silent alarm in every room. Now, that's going to be a challenge for us, huge. We've got 2 buildings that we can't even find a contractor that still services the intercoms. So we have a major issue in front of us. So I wanna connect this. You saw probably here recently where a lot of school districts, took bond proposals up. I haven't brought that up anymore because of the fact that, the language that in bonds right now. So when you put a ballot out, it has to say now, this may increase your tax rate. Now that shuts people off. But what we're thinking of bringing to in discussion this next year is propositions for safety and security, a proposition for upgrading our buildings, and then possibly a third proposition for a campus. We have a campus that, quite frankly, needs to be addressed. Loma Park needs to be addressed. That one, that's a stable community for us. They're all homes, the kids, there's legacy families, as I've heard it called, so that building will need some addressing, as some of our older facilities. You've got Perales on the other side of the district, that the families don't move. That building needs upgrading just because it's old. And so, just to connect it, because back to the safety and security, the House bill is going to require that we have also a armed person on campuses. So they're saying there's gonna be $25,000 for that individual. That is not extra money, guys. That is in the basic allotment. So the basic allotment she keeps talking about gets picked at for everything. There's nothing extra coming. The only thing we've heard of is possibly $200 over the next 2 years to the basic allotment. You have household budgets, what's $200? And because it's gonna come with the upgrading of facilities and things like that. So those are the challenges that are in front of us. Back to your point with vouchers, we haven't even taken that into consideration yet. And they remember, Edgewood had in the 90s, and heard about the Horizon Scholarship, right? The one that was given in the neighborhoods in the late 90s. I think there was a doctor that was giving out a scholarship for kids. And all the studies show most kids that went, it didn't help them. It didn't do anything for them. And so that was part of what I got to share with the committee that I was in front of. But like anything else, they're hearing you, they're not listening to you. There's a big difference there. So.
So what's the projected enrollment?
For next year, where am I enrolled?
About the same 8,000?
8,200, about 8,200 kids. Okay.
All right. So the topic, just really quickly, the recurring theme, and Mr. Basu, I think, started with this, and Dr. Silva about a year ago, and we're still in that stage, the rethink, redesign, recommit. What you're gonna start hearing now in the presentation, we really wanted finance, everything lands in finance, right? But what are we doing to get right side up? We've talked a lot about the issues that we have, and they're real issues. We don't even know what we're facing yet with vouchers and what legislation's gonna come out. We think we know, but there's a lot of thought process that needs to go into this next year. So, as we rethink, redesign, and recommit, you're gonna hear some presentations right now, and we're gonna start with, Dr. Basulto, I believe, thank you. With Ms. Bazaldua. We're gonna hear about processes and procedures, instructional materials, staffing, and some recommendations. And what we're doing to evaluate those things as we move forward, we feel like we have a year, right? We still have a little bit of ESSER cushion rather to work with this next year. But we are preparing for a funding cliff. We're not waiting for the state to come in and save us. It's really internally working with what we know today and knowing that we have these issues coming up. As a district, you're gonna hear a little bit about what we're doing to evaluate what we have in place and make sure that we prepare into the next year as much as possible so that we can keep the district moving and fund balance as intact as we can, so we can address employees as opposed to things. So I'm gonna hand it over to Ms. Bazaldua so she can start us off.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So as you know, one of our main
heard, there were some growing pains with that. But it allowed us to really examine our processes. And so through my department, College Career Military Readiness and Information Systems, we really looked at what we were doing and used it as an opportunity to improve all of those processes and put some systems into place. So what we're gonna talk about today is PEIMS and the information system, look at our master scheduling and how that's improved our student and parent advising, look at the career technical education department, guidance and counseling, and transcripts. So with Frontline, it encompasses many different portions. Ms. Benderly talked about how it impacts our business department and finance. Overall, it cost last year about $340,000. That's not including the special education and RTI component. All of that has a separate cost. The data services cost about $20,000. That's a very minimal cost for the data services. There's other components that are included in that as well. But overall, again, our total invoice was $340,000 in the Frontline. Again, big investment, right? So we want to see what are we getting out of it. Ms. Benderly already talked about how it's streamlining a lot of components for business and finance. It's also done the same thing for our student information system. So what is a student information system? It includes our student demographics. It encompasses our registration, student scheduling, transcripts, our PEIMS submissions, which is how we get information to the state. There's various deadlines throughout the year. Master scheduling, attendance, grading, and student discipline. So through the PEIMS department, we've created a lot of systems that allow for all of our end users throughout the district to be able to have a very clear and one-stop shop of where to go so that they can have all of their questions answered. This is very important because PEIMS has a lot of compliance included in it. We created procedure manuals. We've created a SharePoint site. We also have created data quality meetings throughout the year so that our data clerks, our assistant principals, our principals, everybody's included in these meetings and these processes so that we're doing our data quality checks throughout the year so that when we get to these PEIMS submissions, we are sure that the data we are submitting to the state is correct and accurate. So when we do our PEIMS submissions, these PEIMS submissions affect our accountability. They affect how our students are coded, how we are compared to other schools, and how we are rated as far as accountability. So when we think about on our return on investment, all of these systems through Frontline have allowed us to have 100% of our TEA PEIMS submissions met without the need for extensions, which is a big deal this year because last year when we didn't have a student information system, that was very difficult. It also allows for data integrity, which when we think about having all of these systems in place and ensuring that our data is clean and how that affects our accountability and our funding, obviously that's a huge deal.
Ladies and gentlemen, stage transition to a new platform where it's going to be real-time attendance taking, real-time finances. So we want to make sure that our data integrity is of the highest quality as we move forward into the next couple of years.
Thank you, sir.
You-
With our move from ITEX to Frontline, there was a lot of pre-work that had to go into that. We had to do a lot of the pre-work for master scheduling as far as course cleanup, making sure that as we transitioned into our systems, everything was integrated accurately. And we took that opportunity not only to transition from one system to the next, but also to level up our processes. So Frontline has the ability to allow us to integrate our student 4-year plans. And we took that opportunity to ensure that all of the endorsements that we offer and all of the programs of study that we offer in Edgewood are now input into Frontline so that our students have the ability to see their 4-year plan in Frontline, and our counselors have the ability to see those 4-year plans. And we are able to see what the graduation and endorsement requirements are and use those as planning guides. So all of those have been built into Frontline, and all of the professional developments has been built in as well, so that when we're using our choice cards, they are all aligned to those 4-year plans as well, and everything is aligned throughout.
Let me make a quick comment. Board, just to operationalize for you why this is important. It takes the human error out of things. That's extremely important. I think the second thing too is that we are getting to a point where the kids have a little more responsibility in terms of their course selection, but we do put bumpers in place so kids don't obviously register for the wrong courses. And then just to connect us, for a few years ago, Dr. Hernandez, you mentioned to me about your transcript and not being able to get it. Remember that conversation?
Oh, yeah.
And so part of this is she's gonna get to a slide where she's gonna talk about how they've streamlined that so you can get transcripts. We can move them much quicker to the schools when kids are applying. Because up until last year, we were still having challenges there. So I asked them to present this because you authorized us a couple of years ago to pay for Frontline. And I think we shared already how much the cost was. So you're going to continually hear from us rate of investment over and over. That's sort of where our language is going. It helps us too, to be perfectly honest, as professionals, to make sure that when we're spending money, we're thinking ROI. What's the long-term effect of this investment that we're asking you, the 7 of you, to endorse publicly when you give us those votes. So this is again just we're streamlining our process in a much more efficient way. And I want to thank Ms. Pasadua because she's led up this effort, and this is not easy. This has been a lot of work.
Thank you, sir. So putting all of those systems in place and making sure that everything was aligned allowed us to put it into a nice package for parents, students, teachers, principals, counselors, and a course catalog that not only just lists our campuses and our courses, but also serves as a guide that informs all of our stakeholders so that they can use it as a planning guide. They can use it now that we have our CTE courses all the way down into middle school. We really want our students and our parents to be able to plan ahead. Our course catalog now includes information from early childhood to senior year. It includes all of our campuses. It includes information about all of our programs of study. It also includes information about how it's aligned to our TEA programs of study. It includes where we get our courses from so parents can see how it's aligned. And it also includes the industry-based certifications, where it ties into workforce. It includes wage information as far as if you wanted to choose graphic design and multimedia arts, which is this example, how much potential wage that could earn based on the certifications that we offer in Edgewood, and where we're pulling these industry-based certifications, or the IBCs, which you might hear sometimes from. So parents know that we're not choosing a random certification, but rather it's based on research and from TEA. So all of this information is in our course catalog now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to emphasize that the board, about a year ago, when you were looking at the different types of strategic plan goals, that we want to make sure that parents were informed and students were informed of what is included. This particular hand course catalog outlines everything from graduation requirements to post-secondary opportunities, and not only post-secondary college information, but post-secondary career information. So students and parents are very well aware of the program that they're in. What does that lead post-high school?
How do the partnerships fit into all this? Do they have an input, or do they just follow our lead, or? Because we have requirements, but they have the ability to change it, yeah. So how?
That's a good question, sir. When we're talking about, most of these requirements are state requirements, but for example, our CTE programs, we brought those down as low as 7th and 8th grade, and what they're doing is they support those pieces because students can get high school credit. We just had a conversation yesterday at John F. Kennedy, how we can receive those students coming from Brentwood and allow them to continue their pathway. So they're much aligned to our programs, both at Brentwood, Wren, and Gus. Of course, Brentwood and Gus we have operating partners there.
Can I expand on that? Oh. One of the items for this month's board approval is the addition of the AP, Computer Science Principles course. That is for JFK and Brentwood Middle School, which has an 1882 partner. And the partner was very agreeable to the change. They understood, the background and how it would support the earning of the students' IBC as they matriculated from, Brentwood to JFK. So they are very willing to be in those discussions, and as long as they see how it fits into our 4-year plans and how it goes within our innovation zones, those conversations have been very good.
And I want to also state that part of accountability in terms of CCMR, you heard industry-based certifications, you heard CTE courses, you heard AP. Those particular programs are directly related to our accountability component. So we're expanding that down to 7th and 8th grade. We actually have several courses in 6th grade that align to those 7th and 8th, those aren't career and technical education.
Mr. Santoyo, so keep in mind, exactly what Mr. Chavez said, they also changed the bar on this. Back in the day, it was 60% of graduates was an A, now it's 88% of graduates is an A. And then not only that, but the certification piece for CTE is a lot more stringent coming in the years to come. Back in the day, as long as they were enrolled in one class and they got the cert, they were counted. In about 3 years, they're gonna have to be enrolled in the 4 sequence courses with the certification. So they've raised the bar, plus it's a lot more difficult for a kid to earn a point, because they have to be in those articulated courses, which is why this is critical. Okay.
Are these, catalogs online or are they a hard copy?
We have them, online. We haven't provided them hard copy just because the state changes things so quickly. But we do have them widely available on all of our websites. They are also linked to parent self-serve, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute. So they're very easily accessible to students, parents, and all of our staff. So Dr. Hernandez alluded to this a while ago, how the 4-year plans are not only a tool for academic advising, but it also makes scheduling easier, and it's also a tool for accountability. So when we talk about how it makes scheduling easier, because we have these 4-year plans built into Frontline for all of our students, basically, if a student picks a program of study in cosmetology, for example, we already have that shell built in for them, and if they're a freshman, then we can just click a button that says auto schedule for next year. It automatically puts them in the classes that they need for sophomore year, not only for all of their core, but their electives as well for cosmetology year 2. So that takes away the margin of error for our students, right? Of course, we're gonna go back and do our checks and balances, but that makes it more efficient, and it ensures that our graduation requirements are met for our students. So it allows for that system of checks and balances between a student's yearly schedule, transcript, and graduation plan requirements. Because of all these systems that we put in place, we were able to meet our master schedule timeline, which in a district is huge. Not only were we able to make our master schedule timeline, but we were able to move it up substantially. So we had our first draft of master schedule timeline and student schedules done by March 1st. That allowed HR and finance to have their goals met, which means that we're able to present our budget to you all right on time. So big picture is communication with our course catalog shared on all of our social media and self-serve, informing parents, and then of course professional development. The big thing that we're very proud of in my department is our transcript audit procedures. Dr. Hernandez mentioned the issues that we had previously with transcripts. So all of these procedures and processes that we've put in place have been very necessary to ensure that we have clean transcripts. Not only that we have clean transcripts, but that we have a new method of producing these transcripts. So now instead of all these methods of how we were requesting transcripts before and not being able to track them, we have an online system now of requesting transcripts. We fulfill them online, and we have a tracking mechanism, and so that's how we get those submitted. Our transcript audits this year, we had them verified and 26, right on target. And so, now it's time for discussion and sharing.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
How big is your staff to handle this?
Teams?
Well, this software or this program?
I have 2 teams coordinators and myself.
That's it?
Yes.
So has it grown or has it reduced?
It's,
Grown from that.
it's grown from 1.
Yes.
From one?
That one person. Yes.
I'm just, and you're really focusing on ROI, so do you have financially, Spindler, are you putting a number on any of this? Or, you say ROI, but for me, ROI means on the financial side, how much money are we saving, how much money are we making? I'm just asking it.
Well, PEMS is our money,
It's our
so
moneymaker.
that's what generates all our money is what she submits to TEA from the PEMS department and all the PEMS clerks from all the campuses. They enter the campus data, they review it, they submit it, so she's generating my money.
They also produce the numbers for accountability. Our demographics, everything across the board goes directly to accountability.
I think the other way too is that, just for example, if I'm a student in our elementary schools, they are the ones who are in charge of coding in what I represent. I may be a student in bilingual, I may be a student that could be sped also. All of those are weighted averages, and so that we rely on that in terms of our funding. I think what I'm hearing you say is, okay, so how much money, we said it was 300,000 that we spent?
365 years.
So where have we seen, financial advantages of doing that? So we had one person, but to be perfectly frank, we had one person that had a ton of errors, cause we did, we had a ton of
Right,
errors.
so there's a financial impact there, so
There
that's
is.
what I'm wondering.
That's what it's
Like if we had to put a number as a selling point,
Mhm.
okay, for
Good
Edgewood,
question.
what, as a board member, what could I, cause you know, like, we get criticized anyway, right? But, I hear it and it just frustrates me when people, they're gonna find something to complain about, right? But I wanna be,
We had this
I wanna have
conversation on
ammunition.
Friday, yeah. So we had a conversation on Friday, Mr. Espinosa, really in depth, because I'm a finance person, I wanna put a number to absolutely everything, it's our job. Unfortunately, in the industry that we're in education, you can't always put a number to things, but there are things like product deliverables that we are committed to and being able to meet now. So where we weren't delivering before, I can't necessarily put a fiscal, a number to that, to some of the efficiencies, but
Yeah.
in Pam's case, in Ms. Bentley's case, with processing AP, she's gone from 3 clerks to 2, pretty much in every department because of the system. So there it's a little bit easier to quantify, but in an area where we were traditionally understaffed and weren't able to deliver a transcript to a student
Mhm.
to, be able to enroll in the University of Time, I can't necessarily put a fiscal number to that, but I can put possibly an efficiency number. Does that make
Right.
sense?
and I just want our board to be equipped with that, with these facts, with these.
Yes, sir.
You know, this.
Just the fact that we went back to March 1st for the master schedule, you put a dollar sign on all the work that individuals did up through July, and, you know, that's quantifiable.
Manpower too,
So
I
it's
think.
financial and then it's also,
Manpower.
yeah, so I just wanna be equipped with
Yes.
that. Our board, our board members, I want them to understand that, right? Cause finance is always just a gray area for a lot of people, right? They don't care, or they don't, it's complicated, they don't wanna have to, you know.
The other
talk
piece
about
are
it.
services, the transcript service that we're providing, the information piece that we're providing to parents now because of the system. We're able to do that, and so, students are able to register a lot easier. So there's a lot of refinement and quality in the services that our parents and students are receiving also.
And we're gonna see that through the survey in one of the board polls. That's where we expect to see the customer service that will come back. So it may not be what what we'll see is more inefficient and the services.
I hear what you're saying, Mr. Fields.
And it all ties to long-term governance, right?
Yep.
Our
Yes.
100% that we wanna hit, well, this is definitely going to help push us towards that. But I just want the board to be able to understand, we try return on investment is not just financially, it's efficiencies, it's synergies, it's, of course, communication. It has to do with a lot of pieces there.
That's a good point too.
Is this your Six Sigma training company? Cause that's what it took me back to when you were talking about, that's Six Sigma, yeah, okay.
And this is what I'm going through with what you guys are going through at work, with trying to do this.
Thank you.
It's a lot of work.
Good point, and I'm glad the rest of the board members will hear this, cause it is a good point to give them the words they need in case they get questions, so, okay.
Thank you. Dr.
Thank you.
Westbrook?
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'll try to be
Morning.
brief, but, we have some information for you relative to instructional materials and resources. I know that in the past 2 months, we've taken a lot of items. It is that time of year for us from the academics division where we take these items for your approval, so that we can order them and have them ready day 1 in August. So here's, in a way, what we did is we took all the major items that we take to the board in April and May, and we kind of put them into 4 categories, okay? Quite frankly, you're gonna have tier 1 resources, supplemental resources, instructional technology, and assessments. So let me explain what each one of those categories means. When you get all these purchases and items, you can pretty much put them in these 4 buckets. Tier 1 resources, for lack of a sense, is pretty much the day-to-day instructional materials that kids need, that the state requires to have in front of kids to learn the material, the content, okay? You're gonna hear a lot of HQIM, which stands for High Quality Instructional Materials. I know there's a bill already being put forth through the, right now going through the state, but we're already on it. And basically what it is just making sure that we provide the high quality instructional materials for kids vetted through the state, okay? That's what you call tier 1 resources, gotta have it, okay? Supplemental resources is exactly what that says. It supplements the tier 1, and it can be a range of either providing intervention times, other ways to teach the content, could be instructional, it could be just other formats that supplement the tier 1 resource. Instructional technology, exactly what that means. Those are like the online items, apps, and things of that nature that teachers can use and utilize in the classroom. And the last one is assessments. And in this particular case, we have to have assessments to know what kids are learning and what their gauge is throughout the year. And one of them, which I'll share in a second, is actually directly tied to our TIA, our teacher incentive allotment, okay? So when you put all these things that we've taken to you for your consideration and approval in these past 2 months, you pretty much put them in these 4 categories. And this is the breakdown, as you can see, of all the expenditures and the percentages. You'll notice it's 1.1 million, roughly almost 1.2 million. You'll see 34% tier 1, 40% supplemental, 10% assessment, and instructional technology, okay? Then we've taken it per slide, so you can see all the materials that fall there. It'll give you a description. I'm not gonna read the descriptions because we presented them, but they're there for your review, along with the total investment. Now, the return on investment, like we said, it's a little tricky because in these cases, it's student outcomes. And unfortunately, we do not have those student outcomes as of now, but we have other metrics to measure. But the return on investment, you notice how, but I do wanna point out to the board here, because you'll be hearing a lot this next year, is HQIM, resource. High quality instructional material, state vetted, and you gotta use the materials in the classroom, right? And so that's a return on investment. If we're spending all this money to put in front of kids to learn the content, and it's of high quality, then it's incumbent upon us as educators to use the materials, right? Next year, an instructional priority for the district you're gonna be hearing is HQIM. And Dr. Silva has been working diligently with our content coordinators and all our directors, because this is gonna be a major push to ensure that if we're buying this material and we know it's of high quality, then you use it in the classroom because we know it works, okay? So these are all the materials under tier 1 resource. Think of it in terms of, I gotta have it, we gotta have a way to teach the content. Supplemental resources, these are it's supplements. I'll give you the one, for example, Imagine Learning, which is what we call Ingenuity. Our return on investment on this one, if you notice on the far right, this program, when we ran it, and I'm sure this number's increased since then, but at the time when we ran it, which was I think last week, we had to year to date recovered 1,255 credits. Because that program is a supplemental program to help kids who lost credit and now earned it back. So think about if we did not have that supplemental program, how many kids would be in danger of not graduating because all those credits lost and there's no way for them to recover? So that's the way we would measure that return on investment. iStation is for our K-5, and is really to help kids improve on their reading. And our return on investment, obviously gonna be student achievement, but because we don't have that data, we use other metrics. We were noticing that 90% of students logged in for an hour per week, so they're using it. Because sometimes buying the material alone doesn't give you return on investment, you actually have to implement it and use it with fidelity. Achieve 3000, I'm gonna call it for what it is. Not really happy with this particular one, so we're gonna make that a focal point for next year. Because if we're not gonna use it with fidelity, then the question is, we gotta be critical consumers. So next year's gonna be the year where we're gonna look at this particular supplemental resource, and if it's not being utilized with fidelity, then the question we have to ask ourselves at the end of this time next year is, do we really need to purchase this because we're not using it with fidelity? And look at the price tag on it. And that's just the way it's gotta be from the moving forward. We gotta be critical consumers. And so, no different in academics, if we're not using the material as it should, and it's not giving us the return on investment, then we need to really rethink whether or not this particular supplemental resource is something we need to use. Instructional technology, I'm not gonna go through all of them, same thing here. The only one that you have not seen is Seesaw, but I put it up there because it is a pretty high price tag of 25,000. But it's very popular and it's used throughout, especially in the elementary levels. It's a platform. And so I put it on there. I know you haven't seen it because it's under the $50,000 threshold, but I still felt compelled to put it there because it is at $25,000. Notice the return on investment. Total launches means every time a child gets in there and accesses it through Classic. Classic is the actual platform where all the apps are held. Kids log into that one sign-on, and then they're able to access all these different programs, and it tells you how many launches and hours spent. So that's one way for us to look at our return on investment. Power School, Naviance is blank, and that's under Ms. Basaldua's shop. But that one we purchased back in, I wanna say February, right, Mr. Chavez, in February. So right now, we don't really have information because we're gonna really go into year one of implementation. And what that is a way for kids starting in 6th grade to go in there and start setting up their profile and start setting up where they wanna be. So by the time they graduate, it's like their individualized profile with all their courses, certifications that they've earned, and that's where they would actually create their letters to go in and get accepted to college and all that stuff. That's what they would save all that information. So we have nothing on return on investment, but at this time next year, we'll be able to say X amount of kids logged in and use metrics to see how well we're using that particular resource.
So look, this Power School group, is that integrated into what we're using now, this other, what's the other one called, the one that's?
Frontline.
Frontline?
So Frontline's a little different, but yes, it does integrate and it talks to each other.
Okay.
But I think what this one does, it does even further, because within Power School, I believe, and Ms. Basalua can speak to it more because it's her item, but I put it under here because it's all included, is, my understanding is you're able to go in there, do your letters of recommendations in there when your teachers, you already start saving your stuff in there when you're getting ready to apply for colleges, your certifications are in there, even the amount of scholarship money you've earned, it'll all be saved in this background.
It also allows a student to search colleges and go through that application process. It also allows them to search scholarships, and that was a big question because everybody seems to be going to the counselor and say, scholarship, I need this, that. So this really allows for that tool.
So we just had a meeting last night with the foundation, and every year we struggle with getting enough applicants for our scholarships. It's not a lot of money, but we only get a few kids from each school. So how do like our donors, how can they have access, or how can we
Get on there.
get on there? It's just a link, for us, let's say we put a link and it goes to our website for the foundation, and then the kids
It's a
can,
good thing to put in.
because the letters of recommendation, I know it's a hassle, it's for our teachers to have to write each one of these. This is really, it's really helpful to everybody, not just our kids, but our donors too.
I'm sure that there's a way to do that because when they do a scholarship search, it's part of the Naviance engine and goes out and does that search, but we can definitely look into that.
When we have these two Gus Garcia students, former students, they donated $15,000 to the foundation. And so they want us to give $5,000 scholarships to our kids who were at Gus Garcia. So, I mean, that's pretty specific. So
Right.
we have to, as a district, to help us push that, so we can get our Gus Garcia kids to
That's
apply
great.
for these.
And Mr. Garcia oversees those pieces with counselors, so we can go ahead and connect you to that.
So Mr. Espinoza, to help answer that question as well, we also have dream centers in each of the high schools. And the dream centers, which are gonna be worked through with the counseling department, that is where you could actually get a point of contact, get a name, and then that individual actually helps run or manage the dream center, and that is where the kids go and do their FAFSA, apply for colleges and apply for scholarships. So, we can actually give you a name and say, here at JFK, here's the point of contact.
And guys, it has happened. Mr. Guerra actually works with Jorge for the Lions Club. He came to me last year, and so he's been working with Jorge, and they've gotten more applicants now.
Good.
So that's a good way to go.
Okay.
Take down.
Thank you.
Just let me know, and then I can
Good.
connect you with Mr. Garcia,
Okay.
and get that information. And then, of course, last but not least, is the assessment piece, and you'll notice the largest one, Amplify, we have to have it as a screener for the lower grades. TA, it's a required screener that TA requires. But the big ticket item is, the NWEA, which we already took to the board for your approval. That one is the one that does the beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, and actually measures growth of students from start to end. And then that data is what is used to drive whether or not teachers earn the teacher incentive allotment. Okay, so that's where they get that money based on how they perform, their kids perform on this assessment. Okay? I was trying to be brief, but not throw a lot at you, but if you have any questions.
I do have.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And I waited till the end, I wrote them down.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
On the green.
Can you go back to, the previous, maybe the one before that? Okay, so, I get, and this isn't, I don't need an answer like right now, or any time, I'm just asking a question, but is there a recommendation to schools or to teachers on maybe, like the minimum number of hours to use these programs? Because, for me, like, as a teacher, when you're planning, if you have to spend 100 hours a week, or not a week, but a month, you kind of put that into the curriculum. Did y'all think about that already?
Listen, thank you for bringing that up, because actually, that has been an issue.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna get into the weeds,
Yeah, yeah, I
but
don't
we
wanna-
mentioned how I mentioned HQIN is gonna be a focus. That includes everything, because if you're gonna buy it, you expect to use it, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what happens, and I don't wanna get into too much detail, but
Yeah.
teachers are going to the internet, pick up materials and do whatever they want off the side, right? Versus using what we're spending here.
Right.
So Dr. Shelly, you kinda wanna describe a little bit what HQIM is gonna look like for us next year, because it's gonna be a focal point for the district.
Sure, and so what we're working on, with HQIM is ensuring alignment to, the state requirement. Essentially what we're saying is that 100% of the standards are covered in our materials. If there is a gap in, the coverage of the standards, then we have a responsibility to go back and, ensure that we look at scope and sequence management, and that's one component. The component that you're speaking of in the supplementals and the adaptive programs that we use, there are recommended times that the vendors have gone and they've done their research and their white papers, and they say, if you really wanna see a return of
20 hours a
investment,
week or whatever,
you
yeah.
gotta ensure kids are here. Where we see, really excellence, this year is, Zern Math. We really haven't talked much about that, but it is a T-class decision, and we were able to get that from the state. And we're confident that this is gonna have an impact on our, end of year, results. But what we could see is that, there was fidelity usage. We had schools who were named as fidelity users. We had some schools that were in progress, and then we had just a couple of schools that were identified as no usage. From there, then, we were able to have conversations around what are next year's plans. And so we developed a guiding or operating standard that is, here are the teacher commitments, here are the instructional coach commitments, here are the principal commitments, and the coordinator commitments, to ensure that we are monitoring and not waiting until end of year to see what the progress is. So we're putting in some of those safeguards and mechanisms, and what we want to see is replication of that excellence in Zermatt. We see it in elementary, and we see that our elementary teachers are able to navigate that really well in their daily schedule.
Yeah.
It's part of their instructional framework, it's really designated, and we see that occurring. What we need to work through is supporting our middle schools and our high schools as they try to navigate their master schedules and when these adaptive programs occur. We also need to just ensure that we're not having overlap and that we create a system where we're asking for teachers to do this and this and this, and then it may be just too much. So how do we narrow the focus, and how do we guide them in ensuring that they get to excellence? So,
Okay, yeah, because that was my, you already said it, because I'm pretty sure that these programs have a recommended amount of time that you use them.
Yes.
You know, because there might be a drop in performance and then it might go up later, right? But teachers might not see that. They might see, oh no, they're not doing this. Our schools may not see that. It's going down. I'm not gonna use it anymore. You know, so that's what I'm wondering. Like, hey, it might go down. Like, tell teachers, hey, it might go down, but then you're gonna see an increase. That's usually what happens. Especially if we bought these programs, I'm assuming we research them and all these things, but we're not the fidelity, right? There's no fidelity if we don't use them enough.
Dr. Hernandez, and also the other thing you have to kind of think about is that sometimes people think that, oh, it's the material, and really you just haven't implemented with fidelity. And so part of our next year's focus is training principals and instructional coaches to understand what HQIM means, fidelity, versus, because then what happens is, oh, that didn't work and I want to switch.
Right.
Sometimes you gotta stick with it.
Yes. Yep.
And then be persistent. And then the only way to do that is by looking at reports on a monthly basis, so it's gonna have to be a focal point for us.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes, that is.
And our approach to that is capacity building, the fidelity checks, how does that get connected to student outcomes? So we're really building that out in collaboration with stakeholders, and now we're starting to have cross-department meetings where other folks are involved in the plan, and so that we can really build coherence amongst our departments.
You read our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting to do that a lot lately. I don't know.
Thank you.
Sir, along the lines of Naviance, and I keep on saying every once in a while I talk to Dr. H about it. We have, I know we have a college night where the kids are introduced to people who come out to speak to them or whatever, but that's only one contact, and that's once a year, maybe twice a year. But I've always been of the mindset that if we can get introductions by the kids to graduates from from the district that have gone to different places, and we can put them on, we can ask them and these graduates or future graduates how what their experience is, and be available for contact from these kids, like with a counselor saying, I'd like to apply to the school, what do you know about it? And the counselor has a contact for that school that's willing to speak to the student about it by phone. It doesn't be in person, by phone or whatever, and just to get an idea of what it feels like for that person who went to one of our schools to be attending that school, to have graduated in that school. I think that would, for one, get them to view their future education in a broader note rather than just localized. And I'd like to start doing that, whereby they get an idea of that they don't have to stay here in California. They don't have to stay in the state. They can go wherever it is they want to go. But they need not a little push or a little encouragement by that person who's been there. Of course, we don't want the one that's going to say no, don't go, don't pursue it.
Right.
Didn't work out for them.
So yeah. So
There's a way you can do that on Naviance. I think you can start a database. I mean, you can do it slowly. That's how most schools build it. You find that, like I was just telling Mr. Chavez, he's a graduate. Went from Memorial to Rice, on to his next degree. Those are, yes, good connections for the kids. So I believe Naviance will allow you to do those kinds of things from my experience with it.
And I'm wondering how the dream centers can help also free, but for the kids.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Todd.
Okay. You got it?
Slide.
I got it.
You got one? There's
I have one
ROI.
slide, just gonna go over this very quickly, it shouldn't take very long at all. What I wanted to do was simply take apart the, technology budget, and show you basically from a broad, area, the buckets that we use, the categories that they fall in. So we've got about 1% in hardware and supplies, about 6% in service, and then between 16% and 18%, 16% in safety, 18% in maintenance. Moving over to about 18% in software, and then 30% infrastructure, we've got about, 10% projects, so something like that. And the safety piece includes fire alarms, security, access points, it even includes cybersecurity I put in there as well. These are the safety things that fall in that bucket. Maintenance, this is everything from, how we maintain, different parts of our infrastructure, contracts that we have for that, software, that is what it is, the software and the licensing on most of the software in the district comes through this technology budget. And then infrastructure, what we spend on licensing and, requirements for network, what we spend on to push the data around, that's about $500,000 just to push the data around the district. Now, we get 90% of that funded by the feds through the FCC, but at any rate, that's what infrastructure, and then projects, things that we have to do. We've got projector project, we've got, any number of projects that are going on at this time. So, any questions about this? All right.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to just provide some project updates as it relates to board-approved items, within the past year or so, we'll say. The first project is the PPS parking lot, and it was approved, last year, in August, and it was about $435,000 project. And right now, the ETC, which is the estimated time of completion, we're looking at July of this year. The next item is the warehouse that we purchased on Acme. Just to give you a quick update on it, we've submitted for our COO, which is the certificate of occupancy. That application is out. We're waiting, word back of this approval. We have O'Connell Robertson on site, preparing an assessment of the entire building to look at, how we should go about putting shelving in the facility, as well as the freezers and coolers, and a couple more small items as it relates to plumbing, and maybe even, building a few small offices in there and checking, problems. Well, not a problem. We wanna analyze the HVAC system. So they're doing that work. Currently, at that facility, we are not doing any kind of work that requires any permitting. Matter of fact, we're not doing any work over there at all, cutting the grass and checking on the building. We have a follow-up meeting with O'Connell Robertson, that's tomorrow on the 12th, to try to finalize the scope of the work as it relates to the assessment that they're providing for us. Memorial High School, coolers and freezers, that board members, that information, came to the board in January 2023, and right now it's currently in progress, and we estimate that we need another, month before it is completed. The Kennedy Cafeteria redesign project, Ms. Benderly spoke about it earlier. It was funded through the excess fund balance with child nutrition. The TDA, Texas Department of Agriculture, we brought that plan to you for the expenditure of those funds and how we would expend them, and this is one of those projects. We expect to start this project, this summer, and that's gonna cost us, that was cost about $300,000 project. And so, next we had an emergency
emergency situation, at HR back in February, the HR complex across the way in federal programs. We had a flooding issue due to some pipes busting during inclement weather. That cost us about $205,000. It is completed, and HR was displaced as well as federal programs for about 5 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks. If you'll recall, at one of the board workshops, we brought you a laundry list of different projects as related to Head Start. Dr. Miller Baker had some grant funding, and she had to use it by a certain timeline in March. Some of those timelines were extended through the grant, and so this gives you an idea of how many of those were completed. We have one that's subject to be completed with an ETC of May the 19th, and one subject to be completed tomorrow, matter of fact. So, and the rest of those there, I won't read them to you. They have been completed, and they were completed on time and on budget. We have chiller replacements. We brought to the board chiller replacements, and this was district-wide at various locations. Those locations are listed there. We brought 2 sets of, how can I say it, contractors. One was Train and the other was HTS. And these chillers for Train was about $3.4 million, and HTS came in about $2.2 million. And these are the actual locations, again, of those chiller replacements. We have not received any of these chillers yet. We knew that we wanted to buy them because there was a huge lead time, and we wanted to maximize cost because within a few days, the cost was continuing to go up. We did understand that it would be X number of weeks before we received them. Of these chillers, again, we haven't received any, and the date has been pushed out again as it relates to when we will receive them. What I'm putting in the Friday board update this week is an actual attachment to outline what I just spoke about in more detail. And I'm giving you the date that we originally thought we were gonna receive these, that they would be shipped to us, and the date, and the new date that they're saying now that they will be shipped to us. So you'll have what I have, and be able, if you have questions after you read that information, most definitely reach out to me through the office of the superintendent, and I'll answer your questions as it relates to these chillers or any other questions you might have. That ends my presentation. I'm open for questions.
So that, what you alluded to about the major, Loma Park, this is, what you're referring to is just cosmetic, right? It's not.
Correct.
Over, okay.
Correct. Mr. Williams, I noticed on slide 50, your first slide, there was a note there on the bottom in green. Did you want to talk about just kind of that process?
Thank you for that, sir. I wanted to note that these are project updates as it relates to things that we brought to the board, what I've discussed. This note is to help you understand that even with those projects going on, if we're still doing work orders every day, all day. We're doing preventive maintenance things such as changing out filters. So I want to make sure that the board understands that we're not just working on these regular projects, but things that come up during the regular course of a day. A busted pipe, leaky faucet, a broken door hinge. Those things we're continually doing through our department as well. Just wanted to make sure that you know the difference. Thank you for that, sir.
Ms. Benson, are those the $6 million for the chillers?
Yes.
Okay, so just to connect,
Yes.
the chillers that you see on that, or the list, pardon me, the chiller replacements, when Ms. Bendeley talked about the $6 million so that we could get indirect costs, moving the expensive to local, that's also part of the reason why it makes more sense to move the expense to local, because that lead time to get the product may far exceed the cutoff date for ESSER 3 funding that ends September 2024. So for a lot of reasons, it makes sense to recoup the indirect costs and also to make sure that we are able to pay. It makes sense for us to transfer expenses into ESER three and bring this expense into local. So that we ensure that we have the monies when we do receive the product, and also so we can recover, about $720,000 from ESER, for other expenses that are allowable. So this is the money, that's where the $6 million are tied to. Thank you, Mr. Yes.
Thank you all.
All right, good morning, team, so I'm the anchor. Okay, so we're gonna close it out. So as you can see with human resources, we went through some of this last time. I just wanted to, give you a little bit more detail on our staffing. So of course, staffing and human resources were a big part of the budget, right, that comes in June sixth. And of course, all of these discussions that we had today, of course, we need to have individuals, high quality individuals to perform a lot of these tasks. So that's why it's so important. So I'm gonna go over staffing, stipends that we pay, vacancies that we currently have, and that we're reviewing, and then of course our substitutes. Staffing cost, this is our local funds. What the cost is, I did include child nutrition, but of course they're self-funded, and then our 199. So it's about 46 million that we have here with benefits. This is on our local side. Then on our federal side, last time what I brought to you was I brought our grant funded positions, which was from 274 on down. I wanted to make sure we included all of our federal side, but as you can see, we're about a 60-40 split almost, or 45-55 percentage. So we're almost right there, we're in half and half. But the important piece here that I wanted to make sure we were aware of is that from Gear Up, and Gear Up ends this year, all right, the grant has ended this year. Oops, sorry, I didn't use the touch screen. So the bottom down, T-Class, ESER 2, ESER 3, in Title 4, we normally get, Title 6, sorry, with our student age parenting program. But the T-Class, ESER 2, and ESER 3 are the ones that are really important, because all of those individuals that are there eventually are going to go back into our local funds. So it's really important that we see that. Right now, we're able to supplement, and we have additional staff members that we are able to fund through these grants. But these grants will be ending soon. So if we can see that a lot of these individuals that are there, I know in ESER 2 and ESER 3, we have a lot of our core curriculum teachers that we can't fund out of there, because that was the whole purpose of the program. And the grant was to close that achievement gap. So we're looking at that, so we were able to reclass some of the individuals that we had in local, and we brought them down to ESER 3. But it's really important that we see that those individuals will eventually go back to our local funds. If not, when the grant ends, we gotta look to see, are those individuals that we need to bring back, or individuals that we need to sustain, right? Next, what we have is our stipends. So these are stipends that we pay out of some of it's local, some of it's federal, and I indicated there as well. We were able to also offset some of our stipends that we pay. I know we did increase our dual credit. We have our core curriculum teachers and how they're funded. Some of those stipends we did embed here. Out of our local funds, of course, a lot of those we have our fine arts, we have our athletics, we have the stipends that we receive for some of those. And when it comes to our federal side, a lot of these we did our longevity pay, we did some of our dual credit, and we did some of our other core curriculum that came out of here. So just wanted to make you aware of the stipends, the salaries that we pay out of our local and federal funds. Then going to our vacancies. So we see our vacancies and we see, wow, these are vacancies that were not filled. Are they really something that we need? How is it impacting our instruction? Because of course, that's why we're here, right? So these are the vacancies that we have, and some of the struggles that we've had with filling some of our vacancies. Some of them, and it all fluctuates, like we mentioned with staffing. Sometimes we started off at 0%, we had all of our staff here. We did have some resignations, so some of those individuals left, right? So that's why you see some of the changes here. Some of our biggest struggles have been really filling our Head Start paraprofessionals, and they have strict requirements on what's required in the classroom to support our Head Start, because at every single minute they have to have 2 individuals with all of our Head Start students. So we have to have a teacher and a para with them. We also have some vacancies down here with Title 2 and Title 3. Again, those are some of those individuals that we had reclassed in there, but we were not able to fill. So of course we have, when we had a total, there's about 2.1, 2.2 in vacancies right now that we see. So as you can see, that's huge in there. I'm sorry, not 2, 8. 9.2 right now where we're at, right here looking at it. So it's a huge gap with our vacancies, but it's important that we're sitting there and evaluating, you know, is it a need that we actually had to have? was it something that we were supplementing our programs with to see how it's going to impact? Yes.
So board, just to make a point of connection here, what you're gonna start hearing me say, is that we are working on right sizing the district. That's the first time I've used that expression, but I'm gonna start using it. We've got to start right sizing our district. You asked earlier, Mr. Santoyo, about what the enrollment is. We're about 8,300. We've gotta right size us to that number for longevity purposes. Because we can't spend money we don't have. And so that is gonna come obviously at some cost, just in terms of human capital. Because anytime you hear that discussion, people become afraid, and they have the right to do that. But you'll see that, I don't know if you've been reading the paper, that for example, our neighbors, SAISD is cutting 16 million in staff. Northside is not gonna cut after all this year. They've made some decisions for themselves. And EISD will be cutting also. They'll be announcing that they'll be cutting staff. And they're doing it like we are, very quietly through attrition. We've been doing that over these last few years. But getting ahead of what we expect to come out of the legislative session, we will probably not be able to be so quiet about it at some point. But I think this next year, we're gonna be okay. But we're gonna, like Ms. Trevino said, anywhere we can examine, and Ms. Bentley, you said this too, do we need this role? That's something we're doing right now. And I know the three ladies, Ms. Martinez, Ms. Bentley, and Ms. Trevino, are doing that. And so when we talk about it, yeah, I have a harder time with it, to be honest. But right sizing is where we're moving. So you're gonna hear a lot of that moving forward.
Next, I wanted to go over our substitute costs. So, it's kind of a domino effect, right? So if we allocate for a position, and the master schedule is built, of course, then that's a need that we have. So we always then have to resort to having a paraprofessional or substitute in the classroom if that's already built. So really analyzing all of our, expenses. So as we look at our sub costs, which is what I mentioned last time that I would bring to you, this is where we're at in our sub costs. So we're at about, 2.8 million in sub costs that we've accumulated up to date. So it's not to the end of the year, this is just up to date, where we are on sub costs. So really trying to see, and analyzing, right now we have staffing ratios that we use for our paraprofessionals, working with our instructional staff, working with our special ed team, to really make sure that we're providing a staff member based on the need of the student, not just a number, right? Not just an enrollment number or like but really trying to analyze that, working with school leadership on, how many times are we pulling teachers for professional development or official school business? Because if we pull a teacher, how many times are we pulling that teacher? Because that means there's no instruction going on, or there's less instruction going on if we're having a substitute go in and cover the lesson, right? We really want our teachers to stay in the classroom. So we can try and see what we're doing. So school leadership is really looking at that, and now is asking for prior approval from our principals. If they're going to pull a teacher out of the classroom for professional development, school leadership will be monitoring that so we can see how many. A lot of times we do pull them, let's do third grade, we're gonna prep because we have assessments coming up. What can we do to see where we're at? So there's just a lot of that we need to be mindful of, and I think bringing it to the attention of those, that are monitoring it would be really ideal, and we're looking to minimize this number so that we can make sure the teachers stay in the classroom.
Just for comparison, you notice next year our calendar had more half days, and those half days are targeted specifically for professional development. So that assists somewhat with that.
Thank you, sir. So what I did is I wanted to make sure, because we had come to you, and graciously we were really having a hard time because during COVID we could not get individuals to come to work, and then right after we were really having people struggle. So we did ask you for a raise on ourselves, and that did increase our fill rate. So now we're looking at a comparison, because along with all the other districts, they also increased rates. So this is a comparison of our sub costs, our sub rates with us, and then those around us. So as you can see, if there's 120, 135 for us, it's because we pay elementary and then we pay secondary differently. Okay, those that just have one number is just a flat number for elementary and secondary teachers. So San Antonio ISD does do both. They do 95 and 105. Those are for high school non-degree, and we have the different categories.
those are individuals that's come on, this is a daily rate. We actually add $20 to that if they are long-term. Now, on the 11th day, if they've been in that assignment, so we add $20 to all of that category. So it'll go from $140 to $155 to $185 to $200 a day. So you can see where that would increase our sub costs, you know, quite a bit. And this is just a comparison. What we also have is, in researching, of course, we have it right now, we just have it straight across the board that individuals, whether they're here for a teacher or they're here for an assistant or instructional aide or an office, they get a flat rate. If they come in and they're non-degree, they're still gonna get 120, just like a sub who comes in and subs in the classroom. So doing the research, we saw that individuals, of course, are splitting it up from professional to paraprofessional. And this is our comparison. I use the same rates because right now that's what we have. Northside, those are their rates, and I can go into detail, but you can see them there. Northside is 90 for instructional aid, 90 for an office or administrative support. San Antonio, same thing, 95, they're all 65. Harlandale does differentiate. If you're an instructional aide, they pay $11.25 an hour. If you're just an office clerk or an administrative support outside of the classroom, it's $10 an hour. Okay. Then you can see Southwest also 95. So the recommendation that we want to bring, we have options. We have option A and option B, and we're still evaluating which one we want to bring forward. We're wanting to propose both of them to you so that you can kind of see the difference. So what we're proposing under option A is that we reduce the daily rate by $20. So we would go from 120 to 100 for the high school diploma non-degree. And then of course every category was down by 20. And then we're gonna make a new recommendation to split between teacher and paraprofessional, and the rates would be here, 95 and 85. And then we do the long term, adding about $5 each to each one in the paraprofessional and $10 for extended sub rates on option A. And then option B would be reducing it by $10 on our daily rate. So looking at that cost. Right now, looking at it on average, if we do option A, with the current numbers that we have on an average, when I looked at the average of all our categories, it'd be about a $400,000 difference right now, with the current amount that we have, and on option B would be about $200,000 roughly. So just to kind of give you an idea of where we're at. So these are the options that we're looking at. So hopefully we can see, and as you can see, we're still very competitive. If we do the 95 and 85, if we come back here, this is kind of where some of the other districts are as far as, and this is current, so if they make any changes, of course, that'll be something different than what they currently pay. So we would be above South San, we'd be pretty close, we'd be the same for instructional aides, we'd be a little bit less for office support. And this is where I think really analyzing our staff, because if we have an individual who's out and does PEIMS, I know that we cannot give access to an individual that comes in just for one day, because that's a lot of confidential information that's provided. So we're really gonna be strategic on who actually gets to call in an office support sub. Unless we know for sure that individual has had training, has come in and been provided, has signed a confidentiality form, because it is confidential information. Then our instructional aides, we're really going to work with a lot of our teams with special ed, because those kids are very fragile. We can't just put an individual in that has not received training. When it comes to tube feeding or changes or anything like that, they have to have that specialized training. So really looking at who's going to be called in to sub and making sure that they have the proper training assigned to that. I just wanted to provide you the information that we have here in comparison to other districts, so that we can make sure. So the other struggle that we've been seeing, and that I wanted to make sure the purpose in bringing this up, is that, as you can see in our vacancies, we have a lot of paraprofessional positions that we are not filling. Right now, we have about 60 based on the ratios that we currently have, that we were not able to fill. And some of that is because our sub rates was so much higher. They were able to make more money coming into sub versus if they took a full-time position, right, as a paraprofessional. So by making these adjustments to our sub rates, we're hoping that we can, so win-win. We can have an individual here who's assigned to us full-time. An individual will make more money by staying with us long-term, and they'll be here as a full-time employee versus just a sub. Now, some individuals do like the flexibility of being able to come in or, not come in when they're not able to. But when we see in here bring a final recommendation to you, when we make our final compensation recommendation. But I believe that was mine, if there's any questions. Yes, sir.
And this has to be included in the budget right now, when we approve it?
It's included in the compensation plan, but again, I think like last year, I think Dr. Hernandez, being where the legislator is, we're probably gonna bring the compensation plan to you a couple of times with some adjustments, so.
Yes.
So to answer your question, no.
Okay, because my concern is, I know you brought that, the reason why, you know, as far as paraprofessionals or substitute pay, but isn't the priority getting somebody in the classroom? So if, for example, we have 20 vacancies, okay? And we're paying the same, or pretty much the same as one or two other districts. Are we gonna lose that sub to another district, one, because they live in the district, and it's easier for them to get there? Or two, because the pay is equal, or they prefer that district because, for whatever reason, reputation, whatever. So my concern is if, you know, we base this, and I'm glad we're doing it, you know, changing it, we have the option to change it, to review it. My concern is having that vacancy filled, and if we offer them, you know, the $165 or $200, you know, they're, you know, for 11 days, I think that's good, and I think we have to, what is it, the word that you use, moving one amount of money to another one, from one place to another?
One budget to another?
Yeah.
Reclassifying?
No, it begins with S,
Sweeping?
Sweeping, yes. We need to sweep it, in order to maintain teachers or these subs in the classroom. But again, I'm glad we're reviewing it, you know.
No, of course.
So.
No, that's a great point, exactly, and ultimately, we hope to fill every position, but you're right. I mean, individuals do get state and local leave days that we do have to call in the sub, right? But trying to monitor and minimize that as well. So, yes, we're providing all the information that we possibly can so that we can make sure, right? Because again, like we mentioned, it's all one pot of money. So we have high rates for one area, something else is gonna be affected, right? So just kind of looking at all the different scenarios. So yes, like what they can, we can kind of review that and see what we can do. Yes, if we can have high rates for subs and fill every position, that's great. You know, yeah, that's a win-win.
It helped us this year, right? I mean,
Absolutely, it did, yes.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anything else?
Okay.
So all of the items you just report, they're gonna land somewhere in the budget. That's why it was critical, and as we move forward into next year, hopefully the point has been that we're moving towards organizational and operational excellence. And where does that mean, and where does it get land, right? Ms. Terry Salinas, and she's not here with us today, but Terry Salinas, has presented to the board before. She's working, with one of our providers. We've been working on this strategic plan. Hopefully it's the last leg. And we had said we were gonna roll this out over the summer to start this, in August. So this is where everything lands, right? In order to get to that North Star goal, we need to make sure that we have a strategic plan that makes us accountable, we're transparent, we build strategies to make sure that we are, leveraging all of our actions and impact everything that we're executing. All of the work that we're doing right now rather is a precursor to how things are gonna land on the strategic plan. We're not waiting to build this out in order to measure our outcomes, to measure what we're doing and what impact we're having. And of course, it needs to be aligned to make sure that all the resources that we're inputting into the district, get us to that North Star goal, and that are aligned to the priorities. So as part of the strategic plan, we're now, in May. There has been a lot of conversations with people in this room and others around the district of what it is we're gonna measure and how. The board has adopted 2 locally defined goals as well. Naviance is a good example of how we're gonna bring in, the community input or the community access to their student records, right? So all of these things have been in progress, and we still need to go through the implementation phase in June and July so that we can take this to the board in August and launch into next year. So the goals are around aligning, everything that we do rather is gonna align, to a strategic plan and to what we do every day. You may hear a proposal, we're still ironing this out, Ms. Salinas through her work is likely going to recommend a local goal 3 around organizational effectiveness. That is really around everything that we do and everything that you heard today, how we're moving the organization forward. So we're building out metrics that we can measure and bring back to the board and that makes sense. So before we even propose a goal 3, it's really gonna be around all the conversations that you hear today. Everything needs to be measured, everything needs to be vetted as we move forward. So we're building that out before we bring out that to the board so that the organizational excellence, the fiscal stewardship lands somewhere, not just academics, but that we get measured as well and what we're doing, how we're moving forward and providing customer service. So expect that to come in the very near future. With that, Dr. Hernandez, we're gonna close it out. If there are any other questions or any closing comments.
Any thoughts, board member?
Okay. And we actually made it on time.
I have a few other things.
I'm sorry?
I have a few other slides in it.
Oh, I was,
Yeah, you still have 3.
you're right, I apologize. I had a little too much steak cooked
We're in the city.
No, you're right. The next couple of things, it's our calendar. We are again already in, May. We have our regular, board meeting coming up May the 16th. We have our work session. I can't read that small, May 30th, I read 29th. And we have board adoption, or the board adopting the final budget on June the 6th. So we have a few more opportunities against the board updates through, the board updates and through workshops. We still have a lot of information to deliver. We're trying to make the budget as neutral as possible. I will point out that we have a lot of opportunity. We talked about vacancies a lot. We have a lot of opportunity to right size without impacting people. And that's the goal. I can't emphasize that enough. As we talk about right sizing, it is the best time right now when you see $9.2 million in vacancies, and really more like 11. We're implementing strategies. Mr. Williams is a great example of, we've got 4 people in groundskeeping that we have not been able to hire. So a contract came to the board. So Mr. Santoyo, to your point about tweaking funds, that's a perfect example. I need to get the work done. So it's, and I can't hire people, so that money goes into contracted services so that we can get the work done. So you're gonna see a lot of those strategies that we implement throughout the year to make sure that we right size one, and then B, we have the option of still getting the work done. So there's a lot, as you can see, a lot of information that we're vetting and a lot of just outside of the box strategies that are very normal, Mr. Espinosa, and business practices that we're bringing into a school district, so that we can make sure that we continue to provide services, so. And then the next was just questions.
Reminders.
I already said that, the May 16th board meeting, and the 30th, we have a workshop, and hopefully adoption, June the 6th. On June the 6th, we also have, Ms. Vendely with us,
Hearing.
public hearing, thank you. So we will start a little bit earlier that day at 5:45.
5:45.
We'll have 15 minutes for the public hearing, and we will go into the regular, board meeting at 6 o'clock. And with that, I really do close. Any questions?